Hey, welcome to another edition of the Chiefs Outsiders podcast. We're previewing a game that seems pretty straightforward, honestly. You have the six-time defending AFC West champions against the Oakland Raiders, who aren't very good at football. You feel like that's a pretty fair assessment?
It is, and it has been for the last several years.
So if we try to give this game a little bit of context, though, deeper than good team will probably beat bad team, I'd say right now we're watching one of the worst football games I've ever seen. We're recording this at halftime of Colts Broncos, and
It's been putrid. It's hard to watch.
I'm watching that game thinking that these teams probably won't tie. I think they're both going to lose.
Neither team can move the ball at all, and I don't think it's because their defenses are playing so well. I think it's just terrible offensive football.
And so you watch this, and you know that we just lost to the Colts. And it feels like that had to have happened in another universe because the Chiefs have looked unbeatable twice, beat a really good team against San Diego, and miraculously lost to the Colts, who just look awful.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that happens is the same way, the only way that the Chiefs lose to the Raiders this week is things like fumbled punts at the 5-yard line or
Yeah, I don't think that the Raiders are nearly as bad as the Colts. They can score points, but they do have some glaring holes and an inexperienced coach, and they haven't looked great so far.
part of that whole narrative I just laid out is probably that I just hate the Raiders, and I think they were way overrated last year. Now, they were a playoff team, and they were competitive in their playoff game, but if you look at their entire season, they had a really bad plus minus points wise, which usually is an indicator that you've overperformed if you have a winning record, but your opponents score more points than you do.
I mean, how much of that is in the two games against the Chiefs, they were outscored, I believe it was 89-26.
And it wasn't that close.
No, no, it was
There was no point in either game where that was competitive.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to give any credence to this Raiders team when I think they've actually got worse from last year despite adding Adams. You add one of the number one receivers in the NFL, but I don't think they're better.
Yeah. And it was actually one of my questions right at the beginning of the season. I was just trying to think through the whole Raiders and Devontae Adams thing, and what I came up with was, what does adding a receiver like Devontae Adams do to a quarterback like Derek Carr? Because people just assume that it's going to elevate him and he's going to be tremendously better. And I think it might have almost the opposite effect, that there's too much pressure in that situation for a guy who has never been good at dealing with pressure.
You know, Derek Carr is like the Mendoza line for quarterbacks. Every time we have a debate about a certain quarterback, they say, okay, is this guy any good? Would you compare? I always say, is he better than Derek Carr? And if you say no, I mean, forget it.
The way you know that he's exactly on that line is that the Raiders themselves have 3 times now gotten to a contract here with Derek Carr, and it was completely up in the air on whether or not he would return, and he did every time. But even they haven't been sure about him.
Yep, he's a league average quarterback. He's not a bad quarterback. He's an average quarterback, and the fact Kansas City has dominated the Raiders his entire time he's been there slants my perspective on him. But when you look at the Raiders, what are they plus at? What is that team better at than the average NFL team? I'd say their number one receiver, their number one pass rusher, and tight end. Yep. So really, I see about 3 spots. Chandler Jones has that potential, but he's not performing this year.
He is not, which their entire pass rush, which again was supposed to be good, Max Crosby has 4 of their 5 team sacks, which I believe is dead last in the league.
So really, I would say at secondary and linebacker, they're average or below average. Overall, I feel like there's not much special about that team. They have two killer weapons, and well, Josh Jacobs is a plus running back.
And
So
he has had a strong start to the year.
he was actually really impressive against the Broncos. So
And talking about these glaring holes on the Raiders, I I think this is a perfect opportunity for the Chiefs' defensive line and the Chiefs' receiving cores, as the offensive line of the Raiders and the secondary of the Raiders are some massive weaknesses. I mean, just completely unproven across the board.
yep, and so I just don't see many matchups that the Raiders are going to win. But that Crosby would have to win, and maybe they're going to have to get a turnover or something.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's been mentioned a lot, but Crosby and Andrew Wiley were teammates in college, so there's a little bit of a, I'm sure there's a little bit of a friendly competition there. Those guys want
I
to
think
beat each other up.
Wiley's done pretty well against Crosby in his career, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think for as much hate and flack as Andrew Wiley catches, he has done pretty well at anywhere the Chiefs have put him throughout his career.
All right, so we've explained that we think the Raiders are at best an average team, probably a little below average. Then talk about where we think the Chiefs are. I think at their best, they're the best team in the NFL, and there's no way you can have them outside your top 5 in any power ranking. So you should win that game every time. Vegas has a 7-point favorite. And one thing escaped my attention from the last game until sitting back thinking about it. We had 3 different tight ends score a touchdown. Has that ever happened before?
I'm not sure if it ever has before, but
It seems like something that would have never happened before.
got to be very rare if it has.
But if it was the first time that ever happened, you'd be seeing it all over the place. So, incredible depth with the number of weapons they've got.
And it really just affirms what you were saying before the season about how strong this tight end room can be.
And let's talk a little bit about news with the team. Several new players coming back or potentially coming back soon.
Yeah, Chris Conley and Marcus Kemp signed to the practice squad today. So you get 2 receivers who have a lot of experience in the system. One seems to be more of a special teamer. That's Marcus Kemp. If he's going to contribute or get called up, it's going to be for special teams. And Conley, I imagine if he would get called up, that would be because of injury or they're just looking to add juice to the offense.
So we all, as NFL fans, we know how it goes. You can be riding high, and then all of a sudden you're missing 3 of your top 4 receivers or whatever position group might get hit or spread around the team. So you've got to have that depth. And so those are 2 guys. There's really about 5 guys off the top of my head that have contributed to winning games for the Chiefs that can be added potentially very soon. So you've got those 2 guys that are on the practice squad. Then you've got Lucas Niang, who is eligible to return to practice, but it looks like he may not come back to practice quite yet. But that could be valuable depth. As I don't think he's likely to take a starting spot from Wiley, but that could be valuable depth if either of our tackles go down late in the year. Then you've got our running back from last year. His name, I just lost his name.
Derek Gore.
Derek Gore looked really good playing last year. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up taking a roster spot from Ronald Jones because he plays special teams. Kemp and Derek Gore are guys who could get moved up because they play special teams. And then Blake Bell.
And worse, you're leaving one out there. Blake Bell, I think, is a sneaky possible boost to the offense because he is far and away the Chiefs' best blocker at tight end. And I mean, and can sneak out and catch a ball when he's wide open. But Noah Gray, Jody Fortson, and Travis Kelsey at this point in his career are not guys that are plus blockers. They can do it when called upon, but they're not. But Blake Bell is a plus blocker and can really do it well.
And then you've got the two defensive starters that we won't have this week, but we could have both of them the week after. No, it'd be 2 weeks on Willie Gay.
Yeah.
Potentially, we could get McDuffie back against Buffalo.
And there is a report today that the team is optimistic that he will play against Buffalo. So you never know. There could be a setback or just play it safe. But we might see him next week.
So right now, the Chiefs are riding high and potentially have some reinforcements on the way. And it'd be kind of fun if it works out that Conley can come back and contribute, but they don't need him at this point.
And
I think that's more, if the coaching staff has a decision to make, whether Watson or Kemp or Conley or who they want in that, or they've got Fountain, it's better to have that kind of depth.
Yeah, and like we were talking about, you never know when the injury bug might, bite a singular position group. And none of these guys are in danger of missing a game. But, I mean, it's the exact scenario you said that 3 of the Chiefs' top 4 receivers are on the injury report. Sky Moore, Juju, and Marquez. None of those guys they were all full participants, but they are dealing with some little nagging injuries.
And then you've got just one more thing. It's not really about this game, but just something I wanted to talk about. That last year's draft class was tremendously successful, having the 2 offensive linemen starting and being part of reshaping is really the strength of the offensive line being the interior 3 and 2 of them being from that rookie draft class. And then Nick Bolton being a difference maker on the defense. And then you've still got Noah Gray and Joshua Kando that are incompletes. They're on the roster. There's still opportunity for them to be productive members of the team, but haven't done it yet. But when you pull 3 legit plus NFL players out of a draft, you've got to feel really good about it. And this year's draft seems like it's going to blow that one away.
The results at this point are already much better, and that's really saying something.
Because mostly I was the most optimistic about McDuffie, and he's an incomplete right now. But you're going to assume McDuffie can play until he can't. And then you got Karlaftis, who's been at least as good as expected from a first-round pick.
I would say he's exceeded expectations, despite there not being any statistical production yet.
Brian Cook and Sky Moore
coming off their best games.
Are both regular contributors already after 4 games.
And they're just going to keep getting more involved and more comfortable, and the coaching staff is going to give them more as they grow into the scheme.
And then you've got Watson at holding down a starting corner spot.
And he already won you a game as a 7th-round rookie.
I mean, what more are you looking for there? Your 2 7th-rounders are legit players right now. Pacheco looks like he could be the best running back on the roster, honestly.
And at worst, it looks like he's going to be a significant part of the offense this year. I
mean, you're looking at potentially this time next year, we might be saying there's 5 starters out of that.
Yeah.
Or more. And there's another corner who's a mid-round, Joshua Williams. Yeah. He was being talked up during camp, but at this point we're not seeing him.
Jalen Watson lapped him towards the end of camp and preseason, and yeah, I think he's gotten a few snaps here and there, but nothing significant. He's incomplete.
So even another guy to hold out hope for. So if you're going to have one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time and one of the greatest coaches of all time, and then just nail your draft classes like this, just watch out for the next 10 years.
It makes them tough to beat. If you can consistently retool the bottom of your roster with mid and late round draft picks, you're going to keep winning football games.
All right. Well, I'm going to go score prediction. Not quite as high as last year, but I'm going 35. Okay, so I'm going to call it 35-17, but it's going to be more than that until fourth quarter touchdown
Yeah,
for the Raiders.
I think the Raiders are better than their record. They've been in every game they've played this year, but have only got the one win. I think the Chiefs win, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders are competitive in this game. It's a divisional game. There's a lot on the line for a team that coming into the year thought they were a playoff team, and they've got to figure out if they can beat the big dogs.
And here's what I'm looking at. There's always games that you feel like you're the superior team and it ends up being close, and you can even give one away like we did with the Colts. But this Kansas City team under Andy Reid has a tendency to go on runs, or they rip off 10 straight
They've
games.
had a 5-game winning streak in every season under Andy Reid.
I think they are too talented to just continually play around with inferior teams.
And here's your fun stat of the day. Patrick Mahomes has more 4-touchdown games against the Raiders than Andy Reid has losses to the Raiders in his time in Kansas City. So that's always a good thing. That leads to a lot of wins.
All right. Well, we appreciate you watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.